From London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. Hundreds of flights cancelled, healthcare, banking and businesses disrupted as an unprecedented IT outage cripples computer systems around the world.
Our other headlines: greater economic reform across many sectors. China's leadership agrees its strategy for boosting the economy.
Israel's defense minister promises to settle the score following a deadly Houthi drone strike on Tel Aviv.
And another school hit by the Israeli military, the 9th such shelter to be hit as attacks on Gaza City intensify. It's the largest global IT outage ever. Some of the world's most critical technology systems have crashed. A botched software update by the cybersecurity company CrowdStrike caused the shutdown, which crippled Microsoft systems around the world. It caused chaos for millions of passengers, with hundreds of flights grounded or delayed, public transport disrupted, healthcare and banking affected, and shops forced to close.
And these are pictures from Delhi Airport in India, where passengers were forced to wait as check-in systems crashed. Nearly 90% of flights were delayed.
Some media companies were also affected. Sky News UK was forced off air, while Australian outlets had to scale down operations. Well, our correspondent Jen Copestake has been following the story. Well, what an extraordinary day. Where do we stand right now? Chaos is receding.
Yes, chaos is receding slowly. It's quite clear now that this is not a cyber attack, and I think that was some of the initial worries when reports were first coming through of what was happening with so many different systems around the world being taken down globally. That was an initial worry that this was caused by something malicious, but it was in fact caused by a bug in a software update from a US-based cybersecurity company called CrowdStrike. And the reason it's so widespread is this is one of the world leaders in cybersecurity products for so many global companies. That includes international banks, healthcare providers, including parts of the NHS here in the UK, and as we've seen, airlines. So the bug was only affecting computers that were running Microsoft Windows operating systems. It didn't reach Mac or Linux users and is related to a product called Falcon. The CEO of CrowdStrike has come out, George Kurtz, saying he's deeply sorry for this disruption, not only to his customers, but people who are waiting for flights to take off around the world, the immense disruption that this problem has caused. He's reassuring people that gradually everybody will come back online. Now, it's a bit complex because this bug, to fix it, it's not something that can be rolled out in the same way that the software update was rolled out. It has to be manually applied to each of these computers, and you can imagine if there's 24,000 major companies around the world using these products, that's thousands of different computers that each have to have this manual fix put back on the computer. So that is going to take some time. We've had reassurance from the UK here, our government saying, the National Cybersecurity Centre issuing a statement saying that they are confident that this was not a malicious attack, that those affected should go directly to the local vendors, to places like CrowdStrike and Microsoft, to get this system resolved. But to underline how seriously this was taken, in Australia, where we saw much disruption there, they held a national coordination mechanism meeting attended by CrowdStrike. This meeting was where they confirmed also that this was not a malicious attack and was related simply, we say simply, to this software update.
So a massive, massive outage. Do we know, Jen, how long it's going to take to actually sort this out, to fix things and get systems properly back online?
Yes, and I don't want to bring bad news potentially to customers, but Microsoft has itself been reassuring its customers the problem is resolved, the fix is going to be applied. But one industry expert, Adam Smith of BCS, which is the Chartered Institute for IT, has said it could take weeks for systems to get fully restored. So for his part, the CEO of CrowdStrike is saying it could take some time. So it's some time until the systems are resolved, but he said they were working all night. They're going to continue to work day and night with their customers to get this resolved. We're seeing, since the COVID pandemic, that so many of our technology systems have become integrated, and we're seeing that this is a consequence of that. These kind of things can have a global scale and impact all of us in such a tremendous way. Well, tremendous is not the right word, in a terrible way.
So the IT department are working on it all night. That's good news. Jen, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Jen Copestake.
Well, let's get a sense of the impact across Europe. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. So, Alex, how big is the disruption there, especially in the airport and across the continent?
Well, Paul, Jamie, you guys actually called it quite right when you said the chaos is receding, and that seems to be the same on the ground. We got here a few hours ago, and it was really chock-a-block, absolutely backed up, queues all the way to the outside of the departures area that we're standing in now, and you can see some of them starting to clear. It is still an incredibly busy airport, and of course, if there is no flight to be rebooked on, passengers will just be stuck here for as long as it takes to get them on another flight. So that question remains. I have to say, speaking to people here at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport, most of them were quite complimentary about considering the tough situation. The airport handled it relatively well. Now, the airport's saying all of this should be sorted out by tomorrow morning. KLM, the Dutch airline, saying that this will be resolved. This is basically resolved now, and that the backlog will be cleared in the coming hours. But certainly that was not the impression across Europe. Let's have a listen to what people said in other top European airports.
The information about the chaos and the outage I actually got from the internet. Then my husband called me to say there's chaos here. I hope I can drop off my baggage at some point, but I suspect I won't get a flight anymore.
We got the information that our flight was cancelled today and that they can't really help us and that they can't rebook our flights and that we should please return to the airline and take care of ourselves online.
What's a bit worrying is that one company impacts the global economy and the life of the planet, because this has impact everywhere. Like in the United States. I also saw airports in Berlin, Amsterdam, really disrupted. The London Stock Exchange, I see, was no longer working. I mean, this is crazy.
So clearly, guys, the question now will be, how did such a tiny software update cause such a massive disruption across the board? And when it comes to European travel, it couldn't have come at a worse time. This is the peak of peak season, so a lot of people have had their holiday plans disrupted today.
Alex Cadier, thank you very much indeed for that. Alex, reporting from Amsterdam.
Well, those are questions for James Bohr, the independent tech and security consultant.
It was one missed test. They've got a very complex tool which is very widely deployed. One mistake at that point leads to this sort of chaos because everything's standardized, everything's centralized, consolidated. So tiny flaw breaks all of that.
This is probably a rather stupid question, but it has to be asked. Does the world not have any backup IT?
There is backup IT, but it doesn't help with something like this because they've deployed the same security solution across the whole network. So you can have as many backups as you want, but if they're all running CrowdStrike, they're useless as well.
So isn't that a rather stupid system?
It is. There's huge problems with the way that we've built these systems, and then we rely on them for this sort of critical infrastructure. It's a massive issue. We've known about it for some time, and these incidents are only going to happen more and more.
And are you confident this was a technical cock-up, or is there any evidence, do you think, of something darker?
I think there's no evidence of something darker. There is no need to blame anything more than human incompetence or human negligence or corporate negligence. If it was something darker, I would expect it to be much more disruptive. If this was done maliciously, it's not very good.
What does this incident reveal about the vulnerabilities in 21st century digital dependence and infrastructure?
We have these critical dependencies on technology companies who do make mistakes and can bring things down. Last year there was a AWS outage, and that affected things like automatic cat feeders. These are becoming more and more common, and as we build this technology into more of our society, we make it more fragile.
Presumably this is a rather bad day in the office for the reputation and value of countless companies at the heart of these failures. I mean, we can't even begin to put a cost on this, can we?
Not really, no. I mean, CrowdStrike aren't going to be compensating everyone, I'd imagine. I'm sure their license indemnifies them against it, but this is going to cause huge damage to companies, and there will be loss of life when we look at hospitals and emergency services being affected.
And presumably the world isn't in a position to switch away from these companies because there aren't easy fixes immediately.
No, and any other company capable of delivering the same tool will have the same risks involved. You can't just rip out something like this overnight to actually swap over from it. Most companies will be 6 to 18 months maybe as a full-time project, and that is going to bring its own baggage and its own risks.
And we'll have a lot more on this massive global IT crisis later in the programme, including getting the US perspective from our correspondent in New York. Also ahead here on CGTN, China and the future of the world's second largest economy. The reforms, it's hoped, that will turbocharge growth.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
These people are the lucky ones. These migrants made the dangerous crossing to Europe in a small boat and were picked up by the Italian authorities. Many people who try to reach Europe have to be plucked from the sea when their boat capsizes or sinks.
This boat had around 30 people on board.
Hundreds of people desperately hoping for a new life in Europe. The thing is, there are huge amounts of people in Europe, particularly on the far right, who do not want them on this continent.
Thousands of migrants allowed to enter without permission, who end up crowding out the slums of our towns and cities.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Reforms to boost both domestic and international businesses. That's the pledge at China's third plenum, a once-in-5-year economic policy meeting in Beijing.
More than 300 reforms have been announced covering finance, education, property, technology and legislative affairs. Our correspondent Jun Chung-Ying reports now from Beijing.
The highly anticipated economic structure reform at its core, including 300 important reform measures that involve reforms on levels of systems, institutions, and mechanisms. First of all, it maps out a vision to build a so-called high-standard market system, calling for efforts to build a unified national market, including the development of a unified urban-rural construction land market, a nationwide integrated technology and data market, as well as a unified national electricity market. And the country will also improve the market system and rules for its labor, capital, land, knowledge, technology, management, and data. Also, the system underpinning the market economy will be refined, including optimizing the systems for property rights protection, for information disclosure, market access, bankruptcy exit, and credit supervision. To strengthen its macroeconomic governance, officials also said that China looks to improve the fiscal relations between central and local governments, and research will also be conducted to make China's tax system compatible with new business models. And more importantly, the officials also reiterated China's strong commitment to further opening up its economy by aligning with global trade rules, expanding market access, and so on. Let's take a listen.
We need to embrace high-standard international trading rules, expand institutional opening up, and build a high-standard open economic system. We will expand the opening up of the commodity market, service market, capital market, and labor markets in an orderly manner, making life more convenient for foreign travelers, so that the large Chinese market will become a significant opportunity for the world.
So a lot to expect, indeed. We're looking forward to more detailed policies and approaches coming out under the guidance, and we'll keep you updated then.
Zhen Chunying reporting from Beijing. Michael Schumann is chairman of the German Federal Association for Economic Development and Foreign Trade.
We welcome it very much that it is addressing, primarily medium to long-term goals rather than pushing short-term issues and ad hoc stimulus measures that you might probably expect from a similar paper over here, which can quickly fizzle out. Because I think the strength of Chinese policy has always been its strategic foresight and its long-term planning. And of course, this communiqué later on will be broken down into a vast array of measures, but it outlines the direction, and that is a direction of a continued commitment to reform and opening up in challenging times.
So continued commitment to opening up and reform and creating more opportunities for private enterprises. From a European perspective, how do you see this influencing foreign investments and partnerships with China?
And there's a sentence in that communiqué, of course, that aroused our attention, which says that, if I quote it correctly, that, the government will ensure that economic entities under all forms of ownership have equal access to factors of production and compete in the market on an equal footing. And we understand that as an affirmation of the private sector, recognizing its critical role in job creation, in innovation, and economic growth. And this could certainly it points to an easing of market access for private enterprises, reducing bureaucratic hurdles and providing a more level playing field when it comes to competition with state-owned enterprises. This is something that, foreign corporations invested in China have asked for it for a long time. German corporations invested in China have asked for it for a long time. So it is to be highly welcomed, and we hope that we can see major improvements along the way.
Now, China's commitment to high-standard opening up and adherence to international trade rules were reiterated. How can the BWA, the organisation that you chair, leverage this to enhance trade relations between China and Germany, as well as China and Europe?
There's a clear, I think, confirmation in that communiqué that China will stick to opening up its markets, also even unilaterally opening up if needed, utilizing its vast market to promote expanded, economic interaction. China would continue to create significant trade opportunities that will allow foreign companies to gain access to its consumer base. Well, it could be consuming more, as everyone knows, but it's still an extensive consumer base. Very interesting for our companies. And I believe that, foreign direct investments might even flow back into China in larger numbers again when China offers companies new opportunities for growth and partnership. And there's quite a few things in that document that points to that. We're talking about reforms in fiscal and tax, in finance, deregulations, and in other market sectors. So that is a positive outlook.
At least 3 people have died in Bangladesh in fresh student protests against the way government jobs are handed out. Telecoms links have been disrupted, with authorities cutting some mobile services to try to quell the unrest. Thousands of students have taken to the streets to protest about job quotas, which favour relatives of those who fought for Bangladesh's independence. The death toll from weeks of demonstrations now stands at least 33 people.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed the British cabinet at Downing Street, becoming the first foreign leader to do so in nearly 30 years. Zelensky told ministers that restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western long-range missiles are hindering operations against Russia. He also called for tougher sanctions on Moscow.
Vietnam's long-serving leader, Nguyen Phu Trong, has died at the age of 80, just a day after it was announced he was stepping back for medical treatment. The Communist Party says he died due to old age and serious illness. Trong had been in power since 2011, leading a crackdown on corruption and overseeing Vietnam's economic transformation.
Yemen's Houthi rebels say they have carried out a drone attack in Tel Aviv, which has killed at least one person and injured several others. Houthi officials say the attack is the beginning of an escalation in their military operations against Israeli cities. Also, the ICJ has ruled against Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Let's get more on this now with our correspondent Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, the UN's highest court has delivered this advisory opinion on Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. What exactly did it say, and what's the response been there?
Yes, so the Israeli leadership was expecting a difficult report. And that difficult report did come about 2-3 hours ago. The ICJ presenting their findings and calling the Israeli policies in the West Bank as nothing short of a de facto annexation. Israel has constantly been careful of officially annexing the West Bank, along with the millions and millions of Palestinians living there. But the ICJ is saying that the Israeli policies are practically an annexation, also saying that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem are illegitimate. They should be disbanded, and that Israel should stop from its actions which deprive the Palestinian people from self-determination. This according to the ICJ, and as expected also very harsh reactions coming from Israel. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sending out a statement saying that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, regardless of anything that he said in a foreign forums. It should be noted that in a time of a very big divide within Israeli society, both coalition and opposition send out messages condemning these statements by the ICJ. Also a statement coming from the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, saying that such a statement from the ICJ will only support the extremists, will only support terrorism. This according to Yair Lapid, again, the head of the opposition. So practically almost the entire political spectrum coming out against these statements coming out from the ICJ.
And Jonathan, let's turn to this Houthi drone attack there in Tel Aviv, where you're reporting from. Israel's military's investigating a failure to intercept that drone attack. What happened?
Yes, and the initial findings say that the drone was actually under surveillance of the Israeli Air Force, but it was determined that it's not a threat, and that is why it was not intercepted. Why did that happen? Is that a human failure or something else? This is what now has to be examined. The Air Force is calling it a human error, not something technical. Why the error? Maybe because of the misleading route that this drone was taking. It came into Tel Aviv from the west, from the sea, and crashed right in the place where we are. The threats usually coming to Israel come from other directions. If they come from Yemen, such as this drone, usually they fly from the south. If they come from Iraq and Iran, they come from the east. And if they come from Lebanon or Syria, they come from the north or the northeast. The west, the Mediterranean Sea, is many times seen as the only direction where threats will not come from. The Houthis were probably well aware of that, and that is why the drone took a misleading route, entering into Israel from the Mediterranean coast, from the west and crashing very close to the coast in a very central street where we are. Another interesting aspect, this place where the drone crashed is very close, just a few meters away from the Tel Aviv branch of the American embassy. Was that branch the original target? Perhaps. That also has to be determined. If so, the Houthis were able to send a message overnight, not only to Israel, but also to the United States.
Many thanks, Jonathan. Jonathan Regev, our correspondent in Tel Aviv.
2 people have been killed after a school sheltering displaced Palestinians was hit by an Israeli strike. It's the 9th such shelter to be hit by the IDF. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari reports now from Khan Yunis in Gaza.
Well, as a matter of fact, continuous strikes in all different parts of the Gaza Strip, not only targeting the schools that are used by internally displaced people as a safe shelter when they are hoping to survive the madness that has been taking place. Of course, according to some of the people I spoke to in the last few hours. However, they have been targeted, and Israel have been saying that the ones who were targeted are ones who were engaging in the manufacturing of unmanned drones that are used mainly to target the Israeli forces who are active in the area of north and south and Nusayrat in Gaza Central area. Apparently, according to the Palestinians, the ones who are manufacturing those unmanned drones are children and women who were just killed because Israel targeted them. Since the morning, 26 Palestinians were killed in different incidents. 3 houses were targeted in the Gaza Central area. 2 houses were targeted in Khan Yunis area. 10 bodies were brought from Rafah area to Nasser Medical Complex. Another bombardment took place in Az-Zaytun area, and the situation is still very delicate, and the bombardment is still very continuous, while the sound of the explosions can be heard from all different directions of Rafah, even from the very early morning. Pre-dawn, the bombardment were continuous. The destruction of the residential blocks was also heard and could be heard from Khan Yunis and even from the Gaza Central area, something that the ICJ has already addressed and spoke about. They said that the arbitrary displacement of the Palestinian, targeting large populations and asking them to leave their homes, destroying their homes, annexing their land. This is something that has been happening in Gaza, in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, is against the Article number 3 of the international humanitarian law, something that Israel is not so happy about, and something that the Palestinians have already welcomed and have called upon the international community to make sure that they can enforce any decision that is made by the ICJ, and they think that decision is an overdue decision after the people who are living in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem and Gaza have been suffering to a great extent. Despite that decision, the Palestinians expect that their suffering is likely to continue as long as nothing tangible has been done for the sake of holding Israel accountable, and for the sake of just mobilizing all the regional and international power to bring about peaceful end of the ongoing conflict that has been undermining everything in Gaza.
Akram Al-Satari. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. America offline. We'll be live in New York for more on the international IT outage, which has sparked global chaos.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about
The difference. The difference is in the detail. The background.
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories. Hundreds of flights cancelled, healthcare, banking and business disrupted as an unprecedented IT outage cripples computer systems around the world.
Greater economic reform across many sectors. China's leadership agrees its strategy for boosting the economy.
And Israel's defense minister promises to settle the score following a deadly Houthi drone strike on Tel Aviv.
All right, let's return to our top story, the IT outage, which has caused worldwide chaos. Let's get the view now from New York and our correspondent, John Terrett. So, John, tell us more about the impact across the US. I mean, it's been huge. I mean, and what about the company, CrowdStrike, the ones responsible for this outage?
First of all, who thought of America offline?
Me.
I love
Jamie.
that. Whoever
was
thought
Jamie.
of that, give them a bonus. It wasn't Jamie. I don't believe it for 1 second. But anyway, it's whoever did think it was very, 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 very good. Look, guys, this is huge. This is absolutely enormous. The Financial Times newspaper, the old pink 'un, is reporting that this is the biggest global IT outage ever. And it's really very serious indeed. Now, I wondered why the conductor on my train this morning gave me a free ride. He said, I'm going to give you a free ride. I said, oh, are you? Really? Thanks very much. And I wondered why he did it. And the reason that he did it, and I wondered at the same time why the box office, not the box office, the ticket office at the station was closed. And the reason he did it is because these days they don't just collect tickets. They have to punch the ticket or put a laser from their phone onto the ticket to register the fact that I've travelled on the train. And the whole system is down, you see, so that nobody could buy any tickets. And it's the same with the airlines. We've got massive delays in Chicago and in New York at the moment. 2,000 flights have been cancelled. This is definitely going to affect you if you or your family are trying to fly here over the weekend. And then over and above that, we've got banking issues. JP Morgan Chase staff couldn't sign on to some accounts this morning. TV channels have been down here. We got billboards in Times Square, you know, the big jumbotrons. They were blank for a while, apparently, though I did not see that with my own eyes. And you've got to remember that half of the S&P 500, half of them use this software. So it's really very, very serious indeed. Now, the company that's behind this is called CrowdStrike. It was formed in 2012. It's in Texas. And they basically have about 1/5 of the market of what they do best, which is stopping ransomware from getting through. You know, when people try to, they freeze your computer and then they want you to pay to get it back again. They specialize in stopping that, okay? And what happened was today, the CEO has explained it in the last couple of hours, they were updating the content of something that they know as the Falcon sensor, which is their best product. And they were updating the content to make it even more effective. And that's when something went wrong, and it affects all the Microsoft equipment and software that there is around the world. Now, the severity of it depends on which bit of Microsoft you bought, which bit you were using. Some people can just reboot and it's okay. Other people take more to get it all back. But it's a very, very serious issue indeed. We've got CrowdStrike shares down around 10%, Microsoft shares down around 0.5% at the moment. And the boss, George Kurtz is his name, said, I'm very sorry about this, apologized to every person, every group, every organization who's been impacted. The fix is in, but it's going to take a while, I think, before the whole thing shakes out. And it just goes to show you how vulnerable we are these days, because companies, they put this software in, they think they're okay, they don't really have a backup plan, and we're witnessing what the effect of that is.
Yeah, doesn't it just, John? Well, let's move away from the outage story and Netflix. They've released their second quarter figures. How are they looking?
Yes, Netflix, they did, and the shares tumbled last night when the news came in, and they were up a while ago, but now they're in the red again. And the reason is they did beat on the top and the bottom line, so the earnings and the revenue, that was very good. They brought in 8 million new subscribers in these 3 months, where only 4.8 million have been expected, so that's very good indeed. But their guidance for the third quarter came in a little bit light. It wasn't what Wall Street had been hoping for, 9.7 billion, not 9.8 billion, and for that reason the shares tumbled, and they are tumbling again at this hour. Now, they're around $640 a share at the moment. They are priced to, targeted to go to 700, so we'll see what happens. You can never write Netflix off. That's the thing about Netflix. They're also ending their cheapest tier of joining them. Here in America, $11 is the cheapest without ads, so that's going, so that pushes the price up for us to $14. You can still get $7 if you're prepared to have the adverts, but who wants adverts when you're streaming? Netflix, of course, is expanding into sport and gaming and also into live events. That's their big thing for the future. And Netflix is also about the only media organization in the world that is actually expanding at this time. All the rest of them are kind of moribund or looking for people to take them over. So it's a very interesting company, is Netflix, and it always generates a lot of interest whenever their earnings come out or whenever they do anything or make any moves.
John, thank you very much for bringing us up to date. John Serris in New York there.
Well, the global IT outage sparked plenty of reaction on social media, some of it serious, some of it less so. Our correspondent Michael Marillier is tracking the response.
It started off like this. The BDOS, or blue screen of death. People tweeting pictures of their laptops showing an error message. And it progressed to this. Chaotic scenes at airports across the world. Flights cancelled or delayed. And again, that blue screen of death just about everywhere. Some airports went back to basics, writing flight information on whiteboards. This picture taken at Belfast Airport in Northern Ireland. Shoppers in Australia also had a tricky time. This store putting up a sign telling customers that it had only one working cash register. Ouch. Of course, if you want a snack, you go to the vending machine, right? They also fell victim to the blue screen of death. Take a look at this photo, apparently showing a vending machine in Tokyo. All of this is making some people a little nostalgic. This user on X posting a picture of a Commodore 64, one of the first personal computers, with users jokingly asking, is this the future? CrowdStrike is the company at the center of this outage. CEO George Kurtz tweeted a statement saying that the company is actively working with customers. He also said the issue had been identified, isolated, and a fix had been deployed. That's the kind of message you may expect from a corporation in the middle of a crisis, but social media users have been quick to offer their own tips. Dave asking the question rather sarcastically, have you tried turning it off and on again? CrowdStrike now scrambling to manage the fallout from this crisis, but as they do, the tweets, memes and posts will just keep coming.
Well, after accepting the Republican Party's nomination for the presidency, Donald Trump has called for unity across America.
During a speech at the Republican National Convention, Trump also described his near-death experience after that shooting at a rally in Pennsylvania. Our correspondent Owen Fairclough reports from Milwaukee.
All US presidential elections are dramatic, including the conventions, of which plenty have gone to the wire, choosing between rival candidates. But this Republican convention is arguably transformative, because delegates have a candidate who's completely reshaped the party in his image and arrived here after escaping assassination.
I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
The image of Trump's defiance moments after a bullet clipped his ear is already on Republican merchandise.
And we must not criminalize dissent or demonize political disagreement, which is what's been happening in our country lately at a level that nobody has ever seen before.
Many of the delegates we've spoken to this week have noticeably avoided referencing the furore over President Joe Biden's age and fitness for office. And that's been reflected by some of the biggest hitters to appear on this convention floor.
Joe Biden screwed up, and my community paid the price.
Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, targeted Biden, but only on policy.
From the financial crisis to the Great Recession, from open borders to stagnating wages, the people who govern this country have failed and failed again.
If this convention was intended to display unity and inclusivity, some delegates didn't agree with the script.
I don't welcome everybody in this meeting, in this room. The guys up in the fake news, frankly, you guys up there in the fake news have worn out your welcome.
U.S. Senate candidate Kari Lake's rhetoric similar in tone to the way Biden and Trump were talking about each other in the run-up to this convention.
The worst, most incompetent, most corrupt president in history. Donald Trump is a convicted criminal. His son is a convicted felon.
You're the sucker. You're the loser.
But if this week in Milwaukee marked something of a truce in one of the bitterest presidential election cycles in memory, for many, it was the culmination of the Republican Party's transformation.
We are not beholden to anyone or any party.
Whose base has shifted so much, a trade union leader addressed a Republican convention for the first time in its history. Trump personally shaped pledges for a second presidency that relegated an issue as sacrosanct as the federal ban on abortion from his list of priorities. But that doesn't appear to be a deterrent.
Look around. I think we're already pulled together. And I think the differences in some of the, different policies and things, I think has been put aside, and then we are all together, and it's a beautiful thing.
We're more of a party for the people and also for workers, for the common Americans and not for the elites.
As delegates leave this convention considering how it will shape the rest of the presidential election, as well as a potential Donald Trump presidency, the contrast with Democrats could not be more striking as they prepare for their convention in a month's time, engulfing crisis over their candidate. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Milwaukee.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, thousands of athletes, millions of fans. Paris steps up security ahead of the Olympic Games in France.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
And welcome back to Global Business Europe. Well, it's just a week until the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics. The 2024 Games will be historic in many ways.
More events than ever before are being held in public spaces across the French capital, rather than inside specially built arenas. But of course, that creates new security challenges. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
15 million people are set to pass through Paris during the Olympics, and securing the city will take the biggest rollout of French forces in history. 45,000 police and gendarmes, 20,000 soldiers, 15 to 20,000 private security personnel, around 100,000 active agents will try to keep Paris safe during the world's largest sporting event.
There are three main threats. There is a so-called protest threat, there is a threat that is more closely linked to crime, to delinquency, and then there is the issue of terrorism. Imagine a mass terrorist attack, that's the worst case scenario. But the President of the Republic's bet is that there is no success without some risk, then mitigating that risk with the commitment of 100% of our resources. L'engagement de tous les moyens nécessaires.
Security bubbles will be set up around sensitive events with a heavy police presence on the ground and permanent airborne security systems in the sky, including helicopters and drones. While jammer gun operators will be on standby to neutralize any potentially malicious drone attacks by cutting their communications. Paris 2024 is France's first Olympics in 100 years, and some 2,000 police reinforcements are coming from partner countries around the world. Spain alone sending almost 200 officers. Then there are the QR codes that locals have to download just to move around the city and get home. Many streets and bridges have also been closed, causing traffic gridlock. But is it enough?
I think most of French people are concerned about security because it's Paris, it's a big city. We have history with security, and of course it's an interrogation to have because we will be a lot of people in Paris. So yeah,
I think it's going to be safe. That's my opinion now, honestly. I hope, I cross a finger, but I think it's going to be safe, and it's going to be a huge event for Paris. And yeah, we have been waiting for 100 years. I just said so.
Paris is betting big on a unique games with a once-in-a-century security deployment aiming to keep the spotlight firmly on the sport. Ken Brown, CGTN, Paris.
This is also the first time in Olympic opening ceremony history that it's been held outside a stadium. Thousands of athletes will travel a 6-kilometre open-air route along the River Seine. The plan has been described as wildly ambitious, and with that comes a major security headache. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall reports.
More than 100 heads of states are set to attend the opening ceremony, with 300,000 spectators lining the banks of the Seine. But they're not just ordinary spectators. Each had to be invited and undergo security checks. While putting on a world-first ceremony brings new challenges. As areas of central Paris locked down on Thursday, the restrictions have been causing some confusion. A journalist tweeted this image of people stuck at closed checkpoints by the Seine. He says many were unaware that they had to pre-register for access. Well, to help with that, French news agency AFP has tweeted this map. If you want to access the grey area, you need a digital pass, while the red zone allows pedestrians and cyclists access, but vehicles need pre-authorization. These Olympics are the biggest event that France has ever staged. Thousands of troops, many mobilized from Afghanistan, have been employed to Paris. Security is an international effort. The French embassy in India put up this picture of the Indian K9 team in Paris. Around 40 countries are sending police officers to support France. One of those is Qatar. Their armed vehicles have been seen outside some of Paris's most famous landmarks. And the 2 million international visitors have been told to stay vigilant. The United States is urging citizens to download this photo X page and keep it stored on their phones whilst in France. It has the US Embassy and consulate details, as well as numbers for the French emergency services.
Anne-Elisabeth Moutet is a French journalist and distinguished commentator. Anne-Elisabeth, welcome back. Lovely to see you. This looks like a security nightmare. What's it like living through this?
It's very strange because we have about 44,000 railings, which are grills that are 8 foot tall, and that's cross and go against streets and forbid you to cross avenues for hundreds of meters. They're all deployed to secure the perimeter, and it's supposed to get better at some stage, but we don't know what the plans are because communication hasn't been as precise as one might have wished. So it is just very, very strange. And it's really a feeling that if they manage to make out of this something world-shaking, then everything will be forgiven. But if it doesn't work out for various reasons, and we can name several, then it's a bit different.
Are Parisians and the wider French public excited about hosting the Olympic Games?
I would say less than you'd think, because there are lots of criticism. It's not always from the same quarter, and sometimes they overlap. The left, and you know that we've had a sequence of politics recently, and so the left-wing alliance are saying these are the Olympics of the rich. The tickets are extremely expensive. The Parisians are sort of barricaded against people from the outside, and they don't mean foreigners, they mean people from the provinces. And the idea that so much disruption has been brought to essentially the lives of people who'd like to work, thank you very much, is also something that doesn't always work so well. So there's less enthusiasm, I would say, something which I could compare to it, which is when we had the World Cup of rugby or football, and that is something that people like in a much more genuine manner, because really our lives are completely disrupted. There are lots of... I happen to live in a red area. If I want to take a taxi, I need to scan a pass and send it to the taxi so that the taxi will come and fetch me. I cannot invite people to my home unless these people have got also a special pass. All of this makes life a bit more difficult than we would like.
We've been watching France's change of political leadership in recent weeks. I wonder how that's affected the preparations for this Games. Presumably, for many senior politicians, this is the last hurrah or first opportunity to jump on the global platform.
In many ways, the reason why we've got a government that has officially resigned, but the cabinet has been asked by Emmanuel Macron to stay on and carry out normal, more everyday policies, but those include the Games. And that's also because the Home Secretary, because the Defense Secretary, because a number of people have, the Sports Minister, all of these people have been preparing the Games for almost 2 years. More for some. And the idea of sort of suddenly having to ease somebody brand new who hasn't got all the preparation under their belt, working on it was impossible. But there's also this feeling of impermanence because there's no responsibility. You know, the people who are going to do this, they will go after that and it will be the end of their mandate. Some of them haven't been re-elected in Parliament, some others have been, and they will be in different parties. It gives a sort of strange light to these games which were they were supposed to be the virtuoso games, the games that no city has done since 1896. And we're going to have it on the Seine, we're going to have it on the Place de la Concorde, we're going to have it in front of the Eiffel Tower. The disruption has been massive, and people are not sure whether this is worth it.
Anne-Elisabeth, we hope you escape from your red zone. Lovely to talk to you. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, the French journalist and commentator. Well, just how sustainable is flying thousands of athletes to this Olympics, not to mention, of course, the tens of thousands of fans? Juliette Mann has been talking to Marie Salois from the International Olympic Committee to test out the claim that Paris 2024 will be the greenest Games ever.
It's been innovative in many different ways in terms of sustainability, and besides their carbon footprints, they have done this materiality footprint, which means that they have made the inventory of all the goods and equipment they would need to deliver the Games. So from furniture to cars to sport equipment to temporary infrastructure, a long, very long list of things. And then they have asked themselves, can we do more with less? So how can we reduce? So for instance, they reduced by 40% the fleet, that will be used by athletes and officials, or they have cut by 25% the furniture. And now, after that, they said, okay, how can we procure these items? Can we rent them instead of buying? And what will be the second life? And they have sought and contracted the second life as part of their purchase or renting, which means that today, as we speak, 90% of all the goods and infrastructures or product have already a second life secured, even before the Games take place, which is a first.
And you can see more of that interview in the agenda with Juliette Mann this weekend here on CGTN.
China will send 405 athletes, including 42 Olympic champions, to the Paris Olympic Games. 37-year-old race walker Liu Hong, who is on her 5th Olympics, will be one of the oldest athletes taking part. Despite that, Liu says that she's determined to push herself to the limit and win gold. Our correspondent Wang Siwen reports.
Numerous global titles have established Liu Hong as one of the world's veteran race walkers. A three-time Olympic medalist, Paris 2024 will be Liu's fifth Olympics. After claiming gold in the women's 20-kilometer race walk at the Rio Olympics in 2016, Liu retired and gave birth to her daughter Xixi, but her passion for race walking remained.
虽然我离开了赛场，但是依然会关注这个赛事，关注中国运动员的这种表现。然后甚至我就带着小孩去看比赛，然后参加一些越野比赛。哎，我发现我依然很向往这种赛场上的那种比赛的感觉。
6 months after giving birth, Liu returned to the field, but getting back to full fitness wasn't easy.
达不到这样的一个你所认为的那样的一个强度，所以你要重新从底层的东西慢慢的建立，所以这个过程会非常难。
Her family and team support played a crucial role in Liu's return and her success. For Liu, balancing training with family is part of the wisdom of life.
对于我个人来讲，我不想就是生完就是只生不养那种。我也很不想错过小孩的每个阶段。对于一个母亲来讲，还是很希望看到孩子每个阶段的变化，他不断的成长。哎，对我来讲也是一种怎么说呢，一种激励。所以当时我们决定就是一直带着他，然后去训练、去比赛。
Since Xixi was 2 years old, she's accompanied her mother to training and competition venues, both domestic and overseas. Passing water and cheering for her mom, Xixi, 6 now, is always by Liu's side.
我觉得哇，不可思议的就是他骑自行车能跟我骑25公里，他5岁的时候就能骑到25公里。
Since her return, Liu has won different titles and claimed bronze at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, Liu will take her daughter to Paris. When talking about her 5th Olympics, she's determined and relaxed. Liu says race walking is similar to life, evolving one step at a time, until the quality of one's actions is transformed into quality. Wang Siwen, CGTN, Yuxi, Yunnan Province.
And she's a veteran at 37 years of age. What does that say about us? Well, you're about to say you. Anyway, in your
makes me feel ancient. Yeah, no, I don't know how it makes you feel, Jamie. But well, these are our headlines. Before we leave you, hundreds of flights have been cancelled, healthcare, banking and businesses disrupted, as an unprecedented IT outage cripples computer systems around the world.
Our other headlines, greater economic reform across many sectors. China's leadership agrees its strategy for boosting the economy.
And Israel's defense minister promises to settle the score following a deadly Houthi drone strike on Tel Aviv.
And that is just about it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN is Africa Live. But we'll see you again next week, same time, same place. From all of us in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.